are live. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are really excited today to be joined by 5 classrooms from across North America. We might be getting 2 more in the next few minutes. So I'm going to give them a chance to do a bit of an introduction. So we've got Miss Gary's grade 2s in Woodbury in Minnesota. Hi, guys. Hi. Welcome in. Oh, we just got Miss Carton's group, grade 3s in Anchorage, Alaska. So I'll welcome them in too. Hi, Miss Carton's class. Hey, we've got Miss Fisher's grade 1s through 5s in Carsonville in Michigan. Hi, guys. Oh, they're just coming in. Miss Fisher's class, welcome in. Nice to see you guys. And we'll look forward to questions in a minute. All right. We've got Miss Schlicker's grade 1s in Durham in Connecticut. Hi, guys. They're good. Thanks, working too. We got all sorts of groups just pouring in after lunch. That's fantastic. Miss Gervin's grade 5s in Gap in Pennsylvania. Let me just pull up your mic. Hi, guys. Hey, breaking the enthusiasm sound barrier. I love it. And then we've got Miss Hanlon's grade 4s in Freehold in New Jersey. Hi, guys. Hey, I think we've had every class in all of Freehold at this point. We're trying to break the record for the most classes participating in Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Of course, the reason you guys are all here joining us today is for our speaker. So we are joined live at the Virginia Zoo, one of our closest partners. We've done probably 20 sessions with them on all sorts of amazing animals. And today we are going to be hearing from Jen, who's going to be explaining a little bit about their zebras, one of the most charismatic and fantastic mammals in Africa. So we're going to learn a little bit about them. And without further ado, I don't want to spoil anything. So I'll turn it over to Jen. Thank you so much for joining us today, and take it away.
Hi, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm so excited to be chatting with you about our zebra. My name's Jen, and I'm a types of zebra, and these guys behind me are called Hartman's mountain zebra. So these guys are from the mountains. We have different types. There's plain zebra that you see more on the big open plains with other plains animals, giraffe, animal like that. And then you have Grevy's zebra as well, which are more of a plains type of zebra. And then these guys are Hartman's mountain zebra. So you actually see them out in the mountains. We have 4 zebra here, and their names are Abby. Her most recent foal's name is Zelda, which they like to move around on me, but I'll find them for you. This one in front of us here is another female that we have, and her name is Rue. And then we have another female named Rose. So we have 4 total. Abby is the oldest at 18 years old, and she is kind of the matriarch of the group. So these guys have a dominant animal that kind of is in charge of everybody, and then the rest of them kind of fall down from there. 2 of them, or one of them out here is one of Abby's babies. And so she's still pretty young. She was just born in May. And so she kind of sticks with mom a lot of the times. You'll see her kind of hanging out with the other zebra sometimes. And then we have 2 other ones. So Rose is 15 years old. And then Ruxa is the 4th one that's behind here. We like to call her Rue. But Ruxa is pretty young. So she's only about 6 years old. And she came to us from another zoo pretty recently, so she's kind of new to this group. These guys are super fun species. Not only are they beautiful, they have very cool adaptations for being mountain animals. So these guys, if you see them up close, they have very long hooves. They look like they're walking on platform shoes, which is kind of cool. And those are made for them to be able to climb the rocks of the mountains versus like a plain zebra, their hooves would look a lot like horses. So if you've ever seen a horse hoof before, that's kind of what a plain zebra would look like. And these guys are born that way. So the day that they're born, they have big long hooves that they look like they're standing on platform shoes, which is kind of cool. Another thing about this particular species versus some of the other species of zebra is they have a dewlap, which is just a big thick piece of skin that is underneath their neck that kind of connects to their chest. And they're the only species that has that. And they're not really sure why they have adapted that way, but they think it has to do with their body regulation, their temperature regulations. These guys are usually in arid climates. And so it's pretty hot and humid and dusty. So they think it has to do with the way that they regulate their body temperature, which is kind of cool. Also, these guys' stripes don't go all the way down their bellies and connect. If you were to see them, if they kind of move around, their stripes actually kind of stop on their sides, where some of the other species of zebra, they go all the way down. So that's another way you can kind of tell the mountain zebra from some of the other species. These guys also share a yard out here with some Watusi cattle. You might see them walk by. They have big, huge, beautiful horns, and they kind of look like a longhorn cattle if you've ever heard of a longhorn cattle. But these guys are actually an African cattle species that are domesticated in Africa, just like we have domestic cattle here in the United States. They're very similar to that, but they just have these big, beautiful horns that are very distinct versus some other cattle species. So these guys live really well together out here. They're both kind of from the same areas of Africa. They would be cohabitating normally. The Watusi are kind of the boss out here. So if they want food, they will move the zebra off the food. There's 3 of them and 4 of the zebra currently out here living together in this yard. These guys are out here pretty much all the time. They're pretty temperature tolerant, which is really nice. The zebra can be out down to 25 degrees. And that's in Fahrenheit. We're here in Virginia all the way on the East Coast, so it doesn't get super, super cold here. So it's pretty rare that it's under 25 degrees, but we do have a heated area that we can take those animals inside if we need to for some reason. But for the most part, they're pretty much out all the time. I don't know, they're not moving around, huh? These guys do also like the snow. So it does snow here once in a while. And when it does snow, they do enjoy playing in the snow. We'll let them out so they can kind of tromp around as long as it's safe. And they will kind of run and play in the snow, which is really fun. So Abby is the only one out here in this group that's had any babies. So her current one that's with her is Zelda, and hopefully they'll come by here soon. But she's actually had 5 in her lifespan. And all of them have actually been girls. So she really likes to have girl babies for some reason. And her most recent one, Zelda, is the one that's still here. That's born in May. So their gestation is about a year long. So these guys pretty much will get pregnant, and they will nurse that baby once they have that full about a year after. They will actually nurse that baby for a while. Sometimes it's 8 or 9 months. They'll get pregnant pretty quickly. They can get pregnant when they're nursing, and then they'll have another baby just right about a year later. So usually Abby's babies are about 13 or so months apart. She has them pretty quickly, but she's the only one that we've had have the babies here at our zoo.
Excellent.
What else?
Yeah, like 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
So you want to talk about
Sure.
or you don't have
Oh, no, I cannot.
conservation.
So other cool adaptations of these guys is they are grazers. So if you think of like an animal like a giraffe with a big long tongue, they eat things off of like plants and trees. They'll be pulling leaves and bark off. These guys mostly eat off the ground, so they eat grasses. So just like a horse you would see out in a field, they'll actually eat off the ground. There's the baby is coming up there. I don't know if you can see her in the camera. So that is Zelda there. You can see they're pretty lanky when they're born. They have very long legs and little bodies, and that's her mom standing next to her there. It's kind of hard to see her whole body. But Zelda was born in May, so it kind of gives you a size reference. When they're born, they're about 60 pounds, so they're pretty big babies. They come out with, you know, these big long legs and these tiny bodies, and they're all fuzzy, but they are up and moving very, very quickly. Because these guys are a prey animal, especially when they're first born, they get up and they start moving with the herd pretty much right away. They're pretty independent pretty quickly. And they'll actually start eating solid food very quickly as well. But like I said, they'll nurse for a long time. So once they start eating the food, then they eat mostly a hay diet, which is basically just dried grass. And they'll eat that here out on the exhibit. And you will see to this day, sometimes you'll see the baby nursing. You can kind of maybe see Addie's neck dewlap there. You can kind of see it sort of hanging down. The males and the females are about the same size. These guys can be up to 700 pounds. I would say 6 to 650 is about average. Abby being the dominant female and being the reproductive one, she weighs a little bit more than the other ones. So Abby's over 700 pounds, where the other ones are a little bit less than that. But they're pretty big, a lot bigger than I think a lot of people would think. Their backs are probably about 5 feet tall. So they really pack a lot of weight into those smaller bodies. They're kind of like the size of more like a pony than a standard horse. But they just pack a lot of weight into those little bodies. You can probably see the baby coming up here. These guys do really enjoy rolling out here as well. So they'll dust bathe. They'll actually roll around on the ground and get that dust all over them. It's good for their fur, helps their condition, cools them off if they're hot. And it's pretty adorable to watch too.
Awesome. And so Jen, could you tell us a little bit about what group zebras are in? Like what are their relatives?
What are their relatives? So these guys are a hoofstock animal. They're related to, I guess, horses would be one of the biggest ones that people kind of think of when they look at a zebra. We kind of like to say they're like naughty horses with stripes. They have a mane, they have that big long tail. So they look very, very similar to horses. They just have those beautiful black and white stripes.
Yeah, and so one of our big focuses here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is conservation. Can you tell us a little bit about how many zebras there are in the wild, or is this an animal that's under threat, or what's going on with them?
Yeah, so these guys are definitely under threat, and this is one of the more rare species of zebra. The grevies and the plain zebra do the best. The grevies, their numbers are even lower, I believe, than Hartmans now. And these guys, the biggest problem is the areas that they live in, from human conflict and taking away their habitats. That's the biggest thing with zebra. There is some poaching with these types of animals for their furs because obviously they're very beautiful. But for the most part, it's that habitat loss that these guys see. They have to have big areas where they can eat lots of grass, they can raise their young, they can breed, live in groups. So that's sort of the biggest problem is they don't have anywhere to live. If you hear that in the background, I don't know if you guys can hear that. That's lions back there. Can you hear that? Yeah. Very
much. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Very cool. Yep. So there's lions that live behind them. There's one kind of up on the rock. And that's one of the males. That's our male lion roaring. He likes to go in this kind of tunnel that he has back there because when he roars in that tunnel, it echoes like that very beautifully. So it's kind of cool to hear them. And these guys are separated. So obviously the zebra are a prey animal, lions are predators, but they are separated. It just looks like they're together, but they're not. And I will tell you from experience, the lions do not care about the zebra. They see them all the time and they're fed well, so they don't really notice them. The only time that they do notice them is if somebody maybe it has a limp that day, somebody pulled a muscle in their leg, they're looking a little off. The lions will notice them at those times. And then when we have a new baby out here, because obviously in the wild, that would be sort of their easiest meal, would be to grab one of those babies. And so they will notice when we have a new foal born out here. But other than that, they pretty much just ignore them.
Fascinating. Thanks so much.
There's one right there.
Yeah, beautiful. Before we dive in with questions from the class, I just wanted to ask one more. And so you mentioned lions, of course. What other animals are in the ecosystem with zebras here?
Say that again?
Yeah, so what other animals do zebras share their habitat with? You were talking about habitat loss. What else would be affected by that?
Yeah, so different zebras live in different parts of Africa. So these particular ones are up in the mountains more. So their predators would be the lions, animals like that would be the biggest thing. So all types of antelope will live out there with them. These particular ones, you wouldn't have an animal like a giraffe necessarily because they're more of a mountain species, but the zebra as a whole, they pretty much cover all of Africa. So any animals that you would really have in an African environment, you would have these guys. So if you're talking about a plain zebra, they would be living with elephants, rhinos, hippos, all of those sorts of animals, any kind of antelope, really, other predators as well, like hyenas, those would all be living together out there.
Outstanding. Well, thanks so much, Jen. What we're going to do is dive in with questions now. I want to turn it over to our classes who probably have a lot to ask about zebras. We also have 5 groups watching on YouTube Live, so if you guys want to type in some questions in the chat bar too, I'm happy to pass them on. But let's start and take a question from Miss Gary's class. If you guys want to kick us off and come on up, go for it.
Do zebras ever have twins? And if they do, do they have the same stripes?
Yeah.
Do zebras ever have twins? And if they do they have the same stripes? So they can have twins. It is very, very rare, but it does happen once in a while. And I don't know if they would have the same stripes. I guess it would kind of depend on if they were identical twins, just like people. But from a species as a whole, the stripes are very, very similar. It is even hard for people that work here at the zoo sometimes to tell the zebra apart. So we work with them every day, so it's a little bit easier for us, but even just people that come guests all the time, it's hard to tell them apart. They look very, very similar. Sometimes they'll have tiny little differences, or their tails might be a little bit longer or shorter. They might be a little bit fuzzier on their ears, little subtleties like that. But for the most part, as a species, they all look very similar. That's a great question.
It's a really great question, and something that I never personally thought of, and so way to go to that student for such a creative thought. All right, Miss Fisher's class, if you guys have a question and want to come up, go for it.
I was wondering, how fast can zebras run?
How fast can they run? So they can run pretty fast. So these guys can run about 35 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. A giraffe can run a little bit quicker than that. And obviously the fastest land animal would be a cheetah. And those guys can run up to like 65, 70 miles an hour. But these guys are at 35. So it's pretty fast for their type of animal that they are. And the main reason they would be running that fast would be from a predator. They don't normally run that fast. It's only if they were running from something. You will see them kind of running around the exhibit, and these type of animals do that a lot. They'll play and they'll be kind of running around. But those real big bursts of speed would just because they would be running from something.
And you referenced cheetahs in there. And so you mentioned lions eating zebras. Do cheetahs ever go for zebras or not?
No, they would. Yeah, they would go for zebra if it were the right circumstance. Cheetahs normally go for smaller prey like a rabbit, something like that. But it's all about what's available. So if you had a really hungry cheetah in a situation where there was a zebra foal, you might see them going after that. Cheetahs hunt by themselves. They don't hunt in groups, so they wouldn't be trying to like take down an adult zebra or anything, but they might go after a baby.
Yeah, very cool. I always love highlighting zebras, just like many of the students who might have been around a horse in their life. They're a very, very powerful animal, something that most predators won't go for unless they absolutely have to, because there's a big risk of getting hurt. All right, let's go to Miss Carton's class. If you guys have a question, come on up.
How many babies can zebras have?
In like a lifetime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often?
And how
That's
often?
a good question. Yeah, so ours, the oldest one we have here is 18, and then the youngest one that we have here is not even a year old. So they don't really start being able to breed till they're about 4 or 5 years old, and then they can basically have babies their entire life, and these guys can live sometimes into their 30s. So they can have a lot of babies from their whole lifespan, starting from the time they're about 3 till about 30. So they can have a lot. The biggest one that we have here, Abby, she's had 5 babies so far in her life, and she's only 18, so she can have quite a few more.
Very cool. Thanks so much. All right, let's head to Miss Schlicker's class. If you guys have a question, go for it.
No, go ahead. What color tongues do zebras have?
What color tongues do they have? That's so cute. They're actually just pink like our tongues. These guys have pretty big teeth, which are kind of cool. A lot of animals, what we call hoof stock, things with hooves, so things like antelope and giraffe and zebra, things like that, do not have any teeth on the top and just have a hard palate on the top and teeth on the bottom. Zebra, however, are similar to a horse in the sense that they have top and bottom teeth that look very, very similar to a horse, actually. So they have incisors all the way back to their molars. So these guys have, if you've ever seen a horse's mouth, they look very similar. Pink gums, a pink tongue, and big white pearly teeth. That's a great question.
Although I want to highlight, just because you referenced them as well, giraffes have really unique tongues. If you ever get a chance to see a giraffe's tongue, it's like a blue or almost black. It's very neat.
Yeah.
All right.
And the reason that is because those giraffes have to stick their tongues out all the time to get food. So those guys are browsers, so they're sticking that tongue out to get leaves and bark off of trees to eat. So all day long they're sticking that tongue out so it doesn't get sunburned, where it's a little different with these guys. They don't have to stick their tongues out to eat. So theirs looks just like ours, basically.
Very neat. All right. Miss Gervin's class, if you guys have a question, you got a student waiting patiently, so come on up. Yeah, you're good to go.
What is the scientific name for zebras?
What is the scientific name for a zebra? Yeah.
So these guys are equus, which basically means equid. So there's a lot of animals that fall under that category, such as horses. And then their species is Hartmanne. So Hartmanne, I believe is how they spell it. And that is the type of zebra that these guys are, which are the Hartmann zebra.
Very neat. All right. We've got a student in Mount Orab in Wisconsin. So I know you're just home, but if you have a question you'd like to ask it, you are welcome to. Let me just unmute your mic, or it doesn't really want me to unmute for some reason. So in Wisconsin, to the student that's there, if you want to type in a question in the chat bar on the bottom, you're welcome to. I can come back in a minute as well. But first, let's go to Miss Hanlon's class. If you guys have a question, go for it.
How long are zebras pregnant for?
How long are they pregnant for? So their gestation is about a year long. So pretty long gestation. And you can't even really tell that they're pregnant until basically the very end. That baby, as it's growing inside the mom's tummy, it stays pretty small throughout the pregnancy. And then really only the last few months do they get those really round bellies and be able to tell that they're pregnant. So a whole year, very long time.
Very cool. All right. Before we do another round of questions, guys, I just want to encourage our YouTube classes to watch. We got a grade 3 group joining from San Jose, California as well to complete our attempt to get every single state in the US in today. So please do ask some questions. But first, let's head back to Miss Gary's class. If you guys have another question, come on up.
Can you train a zebra to ride like a horse?
That's a good question. So zebra are very trainable. They're very smart animals and they're very food motivated. So we train these zebras. Everybody's trained to get on a scale so we can monitor their weight and their growth. Everybody is trained to follow what we call a target around. So it's a stick that has a red paint kind of on the end of it so they can see it. It's nice and bright, and they're trained to do different things. So each animal is a little bit different. We might have them lean their body in. They might be trained for injection so we can give them vaccines. They might be trained for a blood draw so we can actually be able to draw their blood from them without having to like put them under anesthesia or have a medical procedure that way. The keepers work with them and be able to train them for all types of things like that. But these guys, we don't actually ride. So we just train them for things that we need them to do to be able to give the best care possible for them with the least amount of stress. So we don't train them to ride. They wouldn't like that probably. They are a little more high strung than an animal like a horse, where you're really in there with them and spending a lot of time with them. These guys are a little more high strung. They like to be left alone a little bit more than that. So we don't ever actually share space with them. Everything we do and all the training that we do, we have some sort of barrier between us and the animal. And then we just train them to come up and station and do what we need them to do to be able to take care of them. And we reinforce them with food with that. These guys really like carrots. That's one of their favorites. They also like apples. And one of them, Rue, when we do her training, she just wants hay. So it just kind of depends on the animal and what they like. And they're all kind of trained for different things.
Outstanding. How cool. I mean, so it does quash our dreams of riding zebras together, but it's a great answer. All right. We got a couple questions written in. So the student in Mount Orab wanted to ask, how long do zebras live?
How long can they live? They can live a long time. These guys can live into their 30s. I would say mid-20s is probably about average. They have sort of a similar lifespan to a horse, but they can sometimes live a little bit longer than horses. You do get those rare horses that live into their 30s, kind of the same as these zebras. So they're all still pretty young here. Even Abby at 18 years old is still pretty young. She's still got a good long life ahead of her.
Very cool. All right, back to Miss Fisher's group. If you guys have a second question, Come on up.
Are zebras born with their stripes, or do they get their stripes when they get older?
That's a good question. So they are born with them. And one cool thing about this species in particular is if you look at them closely, their hair, the black hair is actually brown. So it's brown hair that is compacted really, really tightly with lots of other brown hair. And it appears because of that to be black, but the hair is actually brown. And if you were to shave a zebra, they would have those stripes on their skin. We get that question a lot, but the black and white is all the way down to their skin. It's not just on their hair.
Outstanding. Very cool. All right. Miss Mosley's class, again in San Jose, California, wanted to ask, how many male and female zebras does your zoo care for? They came in a little late, so if you can repeat that for us, that's great.
Yeah, no problem at all. So we currently just have 4 female zebras. We most recently moved our male to another facility for breeding. So he has a new group that he is breeding with. So we just have 4 females right now. We have a mom and her most recent baby, and then we have 2 other adult females. We also just moved one of the mom's older foals out. So that's what would sort of happen naturally. If they were in the wild, once they would get to a certain age, they would kind of move on as mommy has that new baby to take care of. And so in the future, we'll probably get another new male in to breed with some of our girls that we have here. That's just to keep the genetics nice and fresh and keep things sort of the same way across the board for all zebras, not just ours here at the zoo.
All right. Miss Carton's group, if you guys have another question, come on up.
We do. Hang on just a sec.
You have all the questions. Everyone's got their hand up.
Yes, coming up, I mean.
So I have a question. Do they speak with their body language, or do they have like their own type?
Like how they communicate.
Yeah, that's a great question. So these guys do have different types of vocalizations. So they will kind of make noises and talk to each other. They have this one call that kind of sounds similar to a donkey, I would think is what you would probably compare it to. For the most part, they're pretty quiet though. They do speak a lot with their body language. That is a great thing to ask. These guys definitely read each other's body language. They have a hierarchy. There is a dominant animal in the group. Everybody knows that she's the dominant animal. You can tell. They hold their head a little bit higher and kind of puff their chest up. They'll trot. They'll actually mount each other for a dominance behavior. The submissive one will sometimes turn around and put their back to the other animal. And another thing that these guys do is they'll actually open their mouths to be submissive to a new animal that they're just meeting. Or say if Abby is on a big pile of hay and one of the other one wants to come up and eat it, they might show that submissive behavior to Abby just to see if they can still get away with eating the hay. Sometimes she'll let them, sometimes she'll run them off. But they do talk a lot with their body language. That's a great question.
How cool is that? Great question and great answer. In fact, in general, whenever we highlight animals at the Virginia Zoo and elsewhere, it's amazing how intelligent and how intuitive and how amazing these creatures are at sharing things with one another. I'm also going to share at the end of this session, I'm going to pass along a link where you could hear zebras actually bray. It is fantastic. You heard the lion already. Zebras are a really unique and fascinating sound, so I'm excited for you guys to hear that. All right, we're getting a whole bunch of questions around the same theme from both our student in Wisconsin, our team in California. So it's how much food do zebras eat and what are they eating there at the zoo?
Yeah, so right now they're mostly eating hay. It's a type of hay that's basically a dried grass that has the correct nutritional amount for these guys. They also get a grain diet, which is basically like you taking your daily vitamin or mineral. They're given that grain diet in the morning and at night. We do move them off of this exhibit, and sometimes we'll move animals around. We might bring them in and put them back out or those sorts of things. So we want these guys to be trained to come off exhibit in case we need them to. You probably hear the lion again. That's Maramba making that noise, I can tell. So these guys do get that grain diet twice a day, and each animal gets a different amount depending on their age, their health, their weight, all those sorts of things. And then they get the training produce, like I mentioned. They'll get some carrots, apples. Sometimes we'll use sweet feed for them, which if you're familiar with horses, we give horses sweet feed as well. It's like a high calorie kind of jackpot for them. So if we're doing a training session or something like that, or we're training a new behavior, then we'll sometimes give them that sweet feed.
Awesome, like chocolate for horses. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Let's head to Miss Schlicker's class for another question. If you guys want to come up.
No, it is. Go ahead, Rob. Your turn. Go ahead. Right up.
What color are their eyes?
What color are their eyes? So they have very dark eyes. I would say they're like a dark brown color. And then they have the white all around their eyes, just like we do. So they have big pupils. These guys can see in the dark pretty well. So these guys are active in the morning, sort of at dawn and dusk is what we call them. And so these guys can see pretty well at those times of day. And then you'll see them kind of relaxing sort of at these times of day.
Awesome. All right. How about Miss Gervin's class? If you guys have another question, go for it.
What's your favorite type of?
My favorite type of zebra? Well, I have worked with plain zebra and these Hartmann zebra. I've never worked with Grevy zebra, but I'll say I like the Hartmans. They're a little bit more challenging. These guys are a little bit higher strung. They're a little bit spunkier with each other. You'll see them sparring and chasing and playing with each other. And I just think the Hartmans are really beautiful. They're a big zebra with that big dewlap. I just think they're a very pretty zebra, where the plain zebra is kind of like the classic sort of zebra that people think of. I think these Hartmans are a little bit more unique, not only in the way that they look, but their personalities as well.
Outstanding. All right. So I'm going to take two more questions from YouTube, one more from our last class, and then we'll wrap up by seeking to understand a little bit about how kids can learn more about the zoo and about zebras in particular. So a question that we're getting a lot of variations on from various classes, including Mr. Hancock joining us from Georgetown just recently on YouTube, is what is a dominant animal? You talked about the dominant zebra. How do you become the dominant zebra? If she were to pass away, how would another one become the dominant zebra? What's going on?
Yeah, so these guys, not always is the dominance in animal groups linear. So it's not always the most dominant, next dominant. It doesn't always go down like that. Sometimes it kind of looks like a spider web. So you might have the most dominant one, and then there may be two a little bit equal, maybe one underneath. So right now, Rose, the other sort of next oldest female, is 15 years old. And she's sort of the next highest dominant. So if something were to happen to Abby, Rose would, from my experience, Rose would probably step into that position. Rose has a pretty dominant personality for just her individual personality. And so I suspect if something were to happen to Abby, Rose would kind of step into that position. Also, all of her foals, they go to other zoos when they sort of get to that age, but we stay in communication with a lot of those people. I have some friends that work at the other zoos that work with her foals, and usually her babies are dominant as well as her. They sort of carry on those characteristics like their mom. And so all of the ones that have gone to other zoos, the other three, are all the most dominant of their groups. Even one of them, she is not the oldest. Actually, she's quite a bit younger than the other two females that they have there. But that zebra went into that group and kind of took over and sort of became the boss. So it's just kind of a trait that Abby kind of passes on. So it just depends on each individual animal and their personality, and a lot of genetics go into it too.
Very neat. And then a question online before we take our last one from our class, and one that I'm amazed it took this long to get to. Probably your most common one. Are zebras white with black stripes or black with white stripes?
So they're both. It kind of depends on the animal. But these guys, if you were to take their fur off, they're actually black and white. So the answer is both. And kind of cool, a lot of people don't know, but if you look at particularly Hartmans, but actually all zebra, their hair is actually brown. It is not black, even though all the trivia games out there will tell you that they're black and white. They're actually brown, and it's just really tightly compacted, which is kind of cool. They're not actually black and white. They're actually brown and white.
Yeah. And then beyond the skin, because I've seen this scientifically tried to be answered before with like embryos and stuff like that, it seems to be mixed. We're not beyond the skin, when the early development of a zebra, it's very hard to tell if black with white or white with black. So a very cool question, guys. All right, and then I want to wrap up with a question from Miss Hanlon's class. If you guys want to come up and wrap us up, go for it.
How if a zebra is albino, does it have stripes?
This is what?
Albino zebra.
An albino zebra.
Oh, would an albino zebra have stripes? I don't know the answer to that, but I would assume that they would be all white because it's just a lack of that color. But I don't actually know the answer to that.
They do. Sorry, whenever a question like that comes up, I like to look it up. So they're
Okay.
weird. They're sort of golden.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're like a pale white with like golden stripes instead. It's very interesting.
Okay, that makes sense. If they're taking that colorization out of their pigment, I mean, that would make sense. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Guys, I know we could ask zebra questions all day. You guys have so many, and I love the enthusiasm from your classes. But to wrap it up, can you tell us where students might be able to find more information about the Virginia Zoo or about your zebras or about zebras in general in particular?
So you can go to virginiazoo.org, and there's all kinds of information on our website about not only our zoo, but our animals in particular.
So I'll share that link with all our classes when we're done. And do check out our past YouTube sessions. We've done so many with the Virginia Zoo. It's so fantastic to have been able to share things from big snakes to ostriches to elephants and more. So I encourage you guys to check those out. So guys, what we do at the end of every session, I'm going to demute everyone's microphone. And so if you guys could join me, boys and girls, in saying a huge thank you to Jen and the zoo. You are all now demuted. And go for it. Awesome, guys. We so appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for being part of our crazy day with 7 sessions. And to Jen and the team, thanks so much for this. This is really fantastic, guys.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Have a